Jeffrey, I lost you. There you are. All right, Jeffrey Shaw is our speaker today. He's the host of a podcast called The Creative Warriors, and he's the author of a best-selling book called Lingo. He's traveled here from Miami this morning to speak with us, and we're very excited to have him. He's a business coach, marketing consultant, and does professional speaking, so we're looking forward to hearing what he's got to say and get to know him. So without further ado, Jeffrey Shaw.
Good morning. I'm really excited to be here. 1 million cups is a new concept for me. I wasn't familiar with this until recently. I'm like, this is awesome. Such a great concept, and of course, anytime any group of entrepreneurs gather, that makes me really excited. I'm also really excited to share with you today the concepts and strategies in my recently released book, Lingo. And the cool thing about Lingo is, as a story, if you will, is that it's actually, the book itself is based on a story from more than 30 years ago, which changed my life. Changed my life, changed my business, multiplied my business 5 times in a single year. And the cool thing is that it's more relevant today than it's ever been, right? Which is why I wrote the book now. Of course, as often as entrepreneurs, we often don't see the thing that's most obvious. And luckily, I had an amazing editor who I was working with. I had written a previous book, which I decided not to publish because it just didn't feel like the right first book. And I was working with an amazing editor, and I happened to mention this casual story of my life from 30 years ago, and she goes, "There's your book." Right? And the amazing thing is, like, it stood out to me, it's like, yes, this actually is the message the world needs now, even more so than 30 years ago. So I'm really excited to share with you. I'm going to share that specific story with you in a moment as well. But to start us off, I want you to imagine that you are in a chaotic, busy, outdoor market. Everyone around you is speaking a language you don't speak. It's loud, it's chaotic, it's a buzz in the air. There's so much noise and conversation in language that you don't speak that it's just kind of like, becomes like white noise. All of a sudden somebody yells out, "Hey Joe, there's nothing like this in Daytona." What happens? Your head whips around. You hear that person, their words cut through the noise much more clear and even at a louder volume than all the white noise around you. Why? Because they're speaking your native language. They're speaking your lingo, right? When we speak someone's lingo, we cut through the noise. We get to the point, people can hear us. And that's the goal. The goal of today's business is to cut through the noise, because imagine what your ideal customers are experiencing every day. Your potential customers every day are inundated with messages and noise. We have more competition in the world of business today than we have ever had. And what we need to understand is we're no longer compared to even people in our same business, right? People compare the ease of working with your website with the ease of working on Amazon's website. They don't even compare apples to apples anymore, right? So there's a greater degree of competition, a lot more noise. We need to figure out how to cut through. And we not only want to cut through to just anyone, we want to cut through to your ideal customer. Why is that important? Well, you know, many of you are probably familiar with the Pareto principle, right? The 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule states that 80% of your income comes from 20% of your business. 80% of your income comes from your clients. Now, what that's really saying is 8 out of 10 customers are a waste of time. Now, I don't know about any of you, but considering how much money and effort and time it takes to get a single customer today, I can't afford to waste 8 out of 10. I went into business in the 80s. In the 80s, you could waste a few. People were throwing money at us. Not anymore. We can't afford to waste 8 out of 10 customers. Add to that, what has been the biggest buzz in marketing for decades now has been the idea of buyer personas and avatars, right? Customers in the future, customers today, and it's only going to become more so in the future, will no longer accept you just knowing precursory details about them, that you might know their demographic, their statistics. What they want to feel is that you genuinely get them. When you create the bond that allows your potential customers to feel like you get them as a brand, that you get them and they get you, it's that bond that draws forward your ideal customers so that every one of your customers are worth your time. But how do we do that? We do that only by speaking the specific lingo of your ideal customer. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. The fact of the matter is, most businesses are built backwards, right? Particularly entrepreneurial ventures. We have an idea. And one of the first things we do is we get really excited about designing a new logo. We create a business card. We launch a website. We fill that website up with words. And then we run around for years, if not decades, trying to find customers to fit into the business we built. Well, that's backwards. The right way to build a successful business is to first identify who your ideal customer is, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, which is my strategy for that is different than what most people know. You want to define who your ideal customer is, understand how to speak their lingo, and build a business specifically for them. They will be drawn in like you can't imagine. I was explaining to Tyler and to Chris that 2.5 years ago, I came down to Miami area from New York City, thinking I was just going to stay for 3 months. I never left. So I came down from New York City, and I wound up settling in a part of Miami that some of you may know called South of Fifth. South of Fifth, beautiful area. My first appointment with my new accountant in Florida, I said to him, well, so much for saving money by living in Florida. My rent is the same in South of Fifth as it was in Manhattan. Bigger apartment, but it's the same rent. He says, well, you do know that you moved into an area that is designed to draw New York City money. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He says, well, South Point Park was designed after Battery Park in New York City. There's a Smith & Wollensky smack in the middle of the park. And I'm like, holy crap, I was duped by my own strategies. Right? That area spoke my lingo so strongly. I'm like, within 3 days, laid down the money. It's like, I'm moving here. Because it felt incredibly familiar to me, which you're going to find out more about. And I didn't even see it coming. The area spoke my lingo, and I'm drawn to it. Right? So this story that changed my life. At 20 years old, I graduated from photography school, and I set out to become a successful family portrait photographer in my hometown. My hometown was called Hopewell Junction, New York. You actually know this, you're nodding your head. It always amazes me when anybody knows this town. It's about 2 hours north of New York City. When I lived there, when we moved there, we shared our phone number with 5 other houses because it was that remote. Now, by 20 years old, we actually had our own phone numbers. We were hitting big time, but there were still no stoplights in town. But I returned to that town thinking I was going to be a successful, even what I considered a high-end portrait photographer. Because I think producing portraits for families is incredibly valuable. These are things you hand down from generation to generation. So I struggled for 3 years. I couldn't get people to hire me. I couldn't get families to buy into my values of thinking long-term and the value of portraits to hand down. And one day I'm meeting with a lady, and I'm explaining to her how wonderful it is to preserve your children's memories and hand down photographs, and she looks at me and she said, that sounds great and all, but I don't have the luxury of worrying about my children's memories. I don't know how I'm paying my rent this month. And it was in that moment I realized a fundamental problem, that I had actually done what every business does, which is like, I built the business I wanted, I built the business backwards. I didn't understand the lingo of the community I was building the business for, because the fact of the matter is, when you're worrying about paying your rent on a monthly basis or putting food on your table, having this guy, this 20-year-old or 22-year-old at the time, talk about handing down photographs means nothing to you. I was speaking the lingo of long-term values to a community that was speaking the long-term of how do I get by? Or was speaking the language, how do I get by today? Complete mismatch. And in that moment, she said something really key to me, which was the word luxury. I had never defined what I was doing as a luxury product, as a high-end family photographer, until I realized nobody needs what I do. It is a luxury product. So knowing that, like, well, how do I sell a luxury product? Who can afford luxury? Affluent people. Great. The problem is I don't know anything about affluent people. I don't know any of them. I don't know how they function, how they tick. But I said, well, I can figure that out. So I set on a 3-month quest to study the emotional and psychological behavior of affluent people and why they chose the brands they did. I didn't so much study the brand, but I wanted to understand the emotional triggers that caused people to go to high-end brands. So the first place I went to is Bergdorf Goodman in New York City. Bergdorf Goodman, if you're not familiar with it, is one of the most exclusive department stores in the world, smack on 5th Avenue at 59th Street in the middle of Manhattan, and tens if not hundreds of thousands of people walk by it every day and don't even know it's there. Why? Because it's not for everybody. Small little sign, people walk by it every day, don't know it's there. Somehow I knew it was there. I think it must have been in a movie or something. So off I trekked to Bergdorf Goodman. I had $20 in my pocket, that was it. So I could afford to buy something for $20, including sales tax, because that's all I had. I walk in and this is the front entrance, and I knew I had landed on a different planet, because I was used to shopping at Kmart with bright fluorescent lights and blue light specials, and this was not that. Warm lighting, dimly lit, the salespeople were dressed impeccably. Something that stood out to me very interesting is there wasn't a register to be found. We'll talk about that in a moment. Because that made me very curious, why don't I see a register? But I head up to the 7th floor, which is housewares. I figured there's a chance I might find something on the 7th floor. I go up to housewares. For $20, including sales tax, the only thing I could find is a tiny votive candle, and I mean a tiny votive candle. But I was there for the experience. And my first experience the first thing I noticed about that experience was, even though I was only buying a $20 item, the saleswoman made me feel like $1,000,000. There was no judgment, even though I was completely inappropriately dressed in a members-only jacket, because that's all, that hated the 80s. I made members-only jacket, and I had hoped that maybe she thought I was the heir to some rich fortune who could get away being dressed like this. But all I know is that I felt good about who I was by being there. I then asked for this little candle to be gift wrapped, because one thing I did know is that things looked expensive, and I wanted to understand how to capture that feeling. So she escorted me over to the gift wrap department. I walk up to that gift wrap department, and it's kind of a cutout in the wall, and there's a woman on the other side. So after the sales lady shakes my hand, she leaves, I lean over the counter with the woman in gift wrap, and I said, "Excuse me, can you teach me how to make this look rich and expensive? I'm trying to understand what rich people like." She laughed at me, but she waved me into the back room, which would never happen today. So now I'm in the back room of Bergdorf Goodman gift wrap department, and she's showing me how to wrap this candle. This little candle, she takes wads and wads and wads and wads of tissue paper, and she goes to put it into the silver metallic box, which I noticed is their signature color. She goes to place it in the box, and she stops with this really over-the-top dramatic effect, and she looks up at me and she says, "Don't use any tape." Does that struck anybody else odd? I'm like, don't use any tape. Meanwhile, in my own mind, I'm thinking, in my family, we wrap our Christmas presents with newspaper and duct tape. Like, how do I not use tape? So I said, well, why can't I use any tape? She goes, oh no, these people, speaking of the clientele at Bergdorf, these people are really particular. Before this is given as a gift, the giver is going to untie the ribbon, take off the box top, unfold the tissue paper, make sure the candle is perfect, put it all back together before it's given as a gift. You couldn't do that if there was tape. And in that moment, I realized something fundamental that changed my life and changed how I would do business and how I coach businesses for the past 30 years, is that every business is a secret language. What I realized in that moment is that brand knew the psychodemographic, the emotional aspects and triggers of their clientele so well that when the recipient, when the Bergdorf Goodman shopper got that gift, they're like, this person's speaking my language. They know not to use tape. And I started looking around that store and realized it was full of cues. What I noticed is that there were designer names everywhere. Up to that point, my business was not in my own name. I had a photography name called Light Images. Really clever. But in an instant, I decided, okay, I need to have a designer brand. My business name was changed to Jeffrey Shaw. Right? I started flipping over things and looking at the prices. The prices were $500, $3,000, not $19.99, not $14.58. The round prices were just round off. So I realized there were all these cues, and I started unraveling and realizing that, you know, the family I grew up with, we went to Kmart and Caldor, for those of you that might remember that as a brand name. and very different cues, right? The registers were lined up at the front of the store, prices were down to the 100th of a cent. Walmart has a very specific secret language. Walmart is speaking the secret language of cost consciousness. That's who they draw into their store, right? That's why they have rollback pricing to the 100th of a cent. Target has a very specific language they're speaking to their customers. Anybody want to guess what it is? No one? No one's brave enough? Target is speaking the language of value. People will spend money that go to Target, they just want to feel like they're getting more than what they're paying for, which is why Target's been very successful bringing in couture designers like Isaac Mizrahi and Vera Wang and Lily Pulitzer. They bring these high-end brands in, what are normally only accessible to affluent people. They bring them into Target at lower price points, and people feel like, wow, I'm able to wear an Isaac Mizrahi dress. Not me personally, but they're able to wear a dress at a much lower price point. IKEA has I think one of the most brilliant secret languages. Is anyone want to guess? No one's ever gotten it right. Not to intimidate you.
Hard to put things together.
You're sort of close. One thing I can tell you for
creativity.
That's the closest I've heard. They're certainly not speaking the secret language of saving time. Can we agree on that? Right? It's a sadistic business model. You go, you follow the lines, you pick it, and then you have to go to the warehouse and pull your own stuff off the shelf, and then go home and build it. I'm like, this is not speaking my language, which is how can I get something done quicker and not pull out a tool, right? IKEA is speaking the secret language of personal satisfaction. People go there to go through this painstaking process of putting it in their cart themselves, lugging it home, putting it together, all for the pleasure of standing back and saying, I did that. Right? They know this. They know this. That's what I discovered in every business. However we want to position ourselves in the businesses in the world is our power. When our businesses aren't working, it's because we're not speaking to the right people, or more than likely, we're not saying the right things to the right people. That's almost always the break. We're not saying the right things to the right people, so we can fix it. Fundamentally, we have to understand that today, hasn't always been the case, but today and probably going forward, people don't hire you because you're the best. They hire you because you get them, and they get you. People make emotional decisions as to who to do business with today, much more so than the cachet of being the best in your field. People will not do business with you if they don't feel good about who you are. Right? We see it every day because of corporate transparency and the way companies are exposed. If someone doesn't like the values of a company, i.e. Uber, millions of people will drop that product if people don't feel aligned with the values and principles of that company. And the same is true even more so for entrepreneurs. Your potential customers make a decision to do business with you because they feel like you get them. The biggest and highest compliment I can ever receive, and any of us can receive as entrepreneurs, is when people look at your marketing. Amazingly, they look at your marketing and they say, wow, it's like you're in my head. That is the most powerful emotion anyone can feel, and they will pay a premium price for whatever it is that you have to offer if they feel like, wow, you're in my head. So how do we then define who our ideal customers are? And it's very different than I think the world has been taught. Usually when we think about, hey, how do I decide who my ideal customer is, we're looking at the customer. The fact of the matter is defining your ideal customer begins with you. I suggest that you ask yourself, what are your innate skills and talents? What is it, this thing that you want to offer to the world? That, of course, is important. What are your innate characteristics? I think the most important thing that nobody asks themselves. What is there about you? How do you function? What do you think? I'm a complete neat freak. I drive people in my personal life crazy. Everything's got to be in order. But you know who loves that? Rich people. People who hire a family photographer and don't have to worry about anything. Their hair being out of place, their clothing being askew. They don't have to worry about when I ship portraits all over the world for their family. They don't have to worry about whether it's going to arrive the way they expect it to. They don't have to worry about any of their children not being photographed at the same age as the older siblings, because I'm calling them and saying, hey, we need to photograph Johnny because we photographed Susie at the same age. right? So my neatness was one of my most powerful marketing tools. It's what kept my clients. So it's important to ask yourself, what are your innate qualities? Right? Look at comedians. A lot of comedians are really foul-mouthed. Well, that's not for everybody. But who is it for? In writing this chapter in the book, it's chapter 2, I called the title, Who Will Love That? Because that's what I want you to ask yourself. Who are you? What are your skills? What are your innate qualities? What makes you you? And hey, who would love that? That's your ideal customer. That's the customer that will be drawn to you for who you already are. That's how you can perform at your highest value. It's why it's important to work with your ideal customers and only your ideal customers. Because in working with your ideal customers, together, you create the highest value. You're not doing all the heavy lifting. Your ideal customer is paying a premium price, hopefully, and meeting you more than halfway. So together, you create value greater than what you could possibly do on your own. And because of that, you get more referrals. People excitedly share everything about you and your business. That's how you define your ideal customer. Once you know who your ideal customer is, I'm going to share with you the basis of my book, Lingo, is a 5-step secret language strategy. This is how you can dramatically change your business by building the strategy and coming to understand the secret language of your business and communicating that with them. Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to communication, right? Branding is your way of communicating to potential customers when you're not present. It's why I believe branding today is more important than ever, because there are eyes on you and your businesses, hopefully all the time, and you don't even know it. I met with a client the other day, coaching a branding coaching client the other day, who has 15,000 hits on her website a month, and she's not converting. I took one look at her website and I'm like, I know why. Because she's not speaking the lingo of her ideal customer, and this is what I correct. Because I can understand the psychodemographic of her ideal customer and help her craft the brand messaging that speaks to that ideal customer. You know how hard it is to come up with your 2-minute elevator pitch? You know how hard that is? Because short and concise is hard. Okay, branding is a 9-second pitch. Your brand message is a 9-second pitch because you have 9 seconds at best to get someone's attention. I was joking with a client the other day that I think the follow-up to Lingo is going to be, my next book is going to be called the 9-second pitch. And then the follow-up to that is going to be the 7-second pitch. And the one after that is going to be the 5-second pitch. Because I don't see the attention span of humans getting longer. That's why branding and brand messaging and speaking the secret language of your ideal customers is more important today than ever. So let's do it. Let's figure out how to build that. The first is to speak the secret language of perspective. These 5 steps, by the way, are in order, intentionally, and it all begins with understanding the perspective of your ideal customer. That's why I went to Bergdorf Goodman that first day. I needed to see a world I wasn't familiar with. The fact of the matter is, almost every business and entrepreneur that I work with is serving in service or producing a product for an audience that they are no longer a part of. Right? So let's say you develop a technology, an app. Chances are you created that app because it solved a problem you once had. That because you created it, you no longer have that problem. But your ideal customer still has the problem, right? Many of us are, as we go on in years and we're building our businesses, we're now serving millennials. Millennials have a very particular psychology, which, by the way, I find fascinating. I'm the biggest fan of the millennial generation. I also have 3 of them. But I love the psychology of millennials. But boy, I tell you, many businesses are completely confused about the mindset and values of the millennial generation. They're a fascinating generation. But the fact of the matter is, you have to understand their perspective. One of the things that puzzles me about millennials, particularly being a photographer, is why is this like disappearing videos thing popular? Snapchat, Instagram, like I'm the long-term permanent photographer guy. Why is this okay that things disappear in 24 hours? So I turned to my millennials, my focus group, called my kids. Like, why is that? They're like, we're just living in the moment. We just want to share that moment with our friends. We don't need to hold on to it forever. You're agreeing. You're in the millennial generation. Exactly. If you don't understand that perspective, you're not going to be able to market to them. You have to understand, they're not holding value onto this stuff that needs to last forever, but they are in the moment. And they're an amazing generation. I say, of the millennial generation, they're the first generation to have the audacity to not settle. Our parents settled. They stayed in jobs that didn't make them happy. They stayed in relationships they didn't want to be in because that's what you did. My generation, shared by some of us in the room, we started off in life with those same values of long-term, but somewhere along the way we became aware of the disillusionment of it all, that jobs weren't going to last forever. Like, I'm not staying in this marriage or this job anymore. And then the millennials have starter marriages, right? They're living in the moment. You have to understand their perspective. You have to understand the perspective of whatever market. And in my case, the gap was huge. I was a lower middle class kid, understanding the perspective of rich people. Your gap may not be as big, but I assure you there's a gap between who you're trying to reach, and you must understand their perspective. Second is the power of the secret language of familiarity. Familiarity creates comfort. Right? That's why I said earlier about my story about moving to south of 5th, part of Miami Beach, and how I made a buying decision because this area felt comfortable and familiar to me, and I didn't even know it. I didn't know why. But we're drawn to familiarity. If you've ever traveled outside the country, how hard is it to not see a Starbucks logo? You can't unsee it. Right? It's so familiar to you. So in our own businesses, once you've defined your ideal customer, you understand their perspective, you want to create an environment, be it brick and mortar or your website, you want to create an environment that feels oddly familiar to them, and they don't even know why. Right? But if your ideal customer is contemporary, modern-minded, you want to create an environment online through your brand image that person would feel comfortable in. Here on my visit here to Daytona Beach, came up last night. I'm staying at the Delta Hotel, Marriott-owned Delta Hotel down in Daytona Beach Shores. And as I often do, I chose a hotel in about 9 seconds from photographs. That's how I choose hotels, right? Because I know what I like, I know it's familiar to me. I like a warm contemporary. I don't like grandeur, I don't like, I know what I don't like, but I also know what feels familiar to me. And I am right 99.9% of the time by trusting what feels familiar to me. This is how people make decisions every day. Familiarity is one of the biggest emotional triggers. I tell a fantastic story in the book about the year that I tried changing up the biscuits at Thanksgiving dinner, and it caused an uproar. You don't mess with traditional biscuits, which in my family is the Pillsbury tube smacked on a counter. And I thought homemade from scratch would be a great idea. It wasn't. You don't mess with what's familiar. Next is the perspective, the secret language of style. Style is, it plays in the field of familiarity, but it's very different. Style is sitting on the surface a little bit more, but incredibly powerful because style is the decision maker. We make decisions, and your ideal customers are making decisions every moment on who to do business with based on whether that style is speaking on their behalf. It's how we choose our clothes, right? I brought on this one overnight trip, more than one vest, more than one pair of shoes, because I wanted to see how I felt this morning, right? And how I chose to get dressed. I like to compare it to if you've ever shopped at a discount store like TJ Maxx, and all your shirts are the medium-sized shirts, if you will, or on one section of the rack. What happens? You flip through those hangers like websites, and what makes you stop? Boom. Because that is you. That style is you. Right? So you have to, again, know the perspective of your ideal customer, create an environment that's familiar to them, and then create a style that just stops them in their tracks, because that's about all the time you have. Every day we walk down main streets, like here in Daytona Beach, which is lovely, by the way. I didn't know this part of Daytona Beach. It's awesome. I only knew the beach side. But we walk down Main Street, America, malls every day. We look to the left, we look to the right, and we decide that's my style, that's not. I no longer go into Abercrombie and Fitch. I'm more of a Ted Baker guy now. Right? That's how we make buying decisions, based on style. Next is the incredibly powerful secret language of pricing. Pricing psychology is amazing because pricing creates perception. And it is fully in your power to decide where you want your business to be positioned in the marketplace. When clients come to me for the Lingo coaching and branding work that I do, and we get around to talk about pricing, the first thing I ask them is, how do you want to be perceived? I don't ask them, what do you want to charge? How do you want to be perceived? Because how you charge has a lot to do with how the market perceives you. When I started, I'll tell you a little kind of a secret within a secret here, and I know this is being videotaped, but I'll take the risk. When I was transitioning my photography business from my hometown of Hope, thinking I was a high-end photographer, I charged $48.02 for an 8x10. All right, already I'm wrong. $48.02. It's a really weird number. It's a Walmart number. But I was charging it because I learned a formula how to price photography and I followed it verbatim. Now I'm reinventing myself in high-end affluence. So I'm reinventing myself and starting my business over again 2 hours away. And in that town, in Connecticut, 2 hours away, I'm charging $300 for the same 8x10. I increased the quality of the mount board a little bit, but that adds up to cents. Why? Because a $48 8x, even if I was clever and I called it $50, a $50 8x10 in my new affluent community I was working to would not have been perceived as high quality. I had to twist my arm, charge $300 in order for people to buy it. Right? Think of what's the perception you get if you go to a restaurant that doesn't have pricing on the menu? Expensive. What perception do you get from a dollar meal? It's not. Right? You actually have the power to position your business wherever you want based on price. And it's not only what you charge, but also how it looks. And this is crazy. And I give examples in the book. If you imagine going to a restaurant for a piece of steak, 3.5, no decimal point, no zeros, has one impression. $3.5, decimal point 00 has a different impression. $34.99 has a different perception. You could actually position that same steak in 3 different restaurants by changing the price by 1 cent and changing the perception of how people feel about it. That's why at Bergdorf Goodman, when I started flipping over all the products in the price list, I started noticing that the prices all rounded off. I mentioned earlier that there were no registers in sight, and that was interesting to me because I was used to going to, as most of us do today, go to department stores where the restaurants are lined up in the front of the store like cattle corral. Why? Because they're drawing attention to the fact this is a transactional relationship. You're here to spend money. In the high end, there's no register to be found. They're hidden behind products or in separate rooms, which is interesting to me. Why is it the market that has the most amount of money, we're not talking about the spending of money. But in the market that doesn't have as much money, lower, mid-market to lower market, it's obvious you're going to spend money. Isn't that interesting? Why is it when we go into a great diner, there's a register of a bowl of mints right up front? But if you go to a nice restaurant, they bring your check in a leather portfolio and disappear to a back room. It's all the power of the psychology of pricing and the perception that you create in how you portray your prices. And then last are words. You know how I said earlier on that most businesses are built backwards? One of the first things we do is we build up a website, we load it up chock full of words, and then we wonder why we're not getting customers or we're not getting the right customers. One of my favorite things to see when I say favorite sarcastically, the number of people that come to me and say, I'm so tired of my customers trying to talk me down on my prices, asking for discounts. And I look at their pricing, and the pricing is, this product's for sale for $197. This one's for $497. I'm like, you're the one calling attention to the fact that $3 matters. So how can you, of course, you're gonna get people complaining about $3. If you don't want cost-conscious people, then just be vague about the prices. Don't draw attention to every cent. And yet this is one of the most common lingo breaks that I see all the time. So it's important that, oddly enough, in creating the secret language strategy for your business, words is actually last. Because it's not until you understand the perspective of your ideal customer, that you understand what feels familiar to them, that you understand the style that causes them to make a decision, and the pricing psychology management, then you can craft the words to attract them. One of the most powerful things I do with my coaching clients in the branding work that I do is create what I call self-identifying questions. Posing the questions that's in the mind of your client, which is what I had said before, the most powerful and biggest compliment you can receive is when somebody feels like you're in their head. So this idea of self-identifying questions, I'll give you an example. One of my coaching clients is a virtual assistant matchmaker, right? So she matches up businesses with ideal customers. And when she was promoting herself, by the title of her book, which was How to Hire a Virtual Assistant. Just not very compelling. And I gave her a scenario. Imagine her ideal customers, the overwhelmed executive or entrepreneur leaving work, hoping to get home for dinner with their children, walking through a New York City subway station, and there's a billboard that says, "Do you want to get your life back?" That's a self-identifying question. That ideal customer is saying, yes, that's me. How does this person know I'm feeling that way? And what do I do about it? Oh, you contact Melissa Smith. That's the power of a self-identifying question. But you can't pose that question until you understand how your ideal customer ticks. So that's the concept, the strategies I teach in Lingo. I'm going to hang out for a bit. We have time for questions? Yeah. A couple minutes for questions. Happy to take questions, and I'm going to hang out as long as you want.